Welcome back. Today let's talk about some of my favorite tips for nature photography. Whether you're just starting out or looking to level up your outdoor shots, this video is going to be packed with useful advice, techniques and some of the gear that I personally rely on to get those dreamy detail shots out in the wild. But before we get started, always follow the principle of leave no trace. Respecting the natural world ensures it remains a place of beauty for future photographers and for the wildlife that calls it home. But now grab your camera or maybe just a cup of coffee and let's get started. And first up, let's start with the mindset, because honestly, this is where everything begins. One of the biggest shifts I made in photography wasn't technical at all, it was learning to slow down. At the end of the day, nature photography isn't about rushing from one scene to another, it's about being present, taking your time and noticing the way the light hits a leaf. When I go out with my camera, especially with my macro lenses, I often spend most of the time in one small area. And that's it. On top, I also move slowly to actually see more potential great shots. If you can get into that state of calm observation, not only will your photos improve, but the whole experience becomes much more enjoyable. And yes, that mindset for me is the foundation of great nature photography. But for sure, gear does matter. So let's talk about gear next. And first off, I keep it simple. If you know me, you already know that the RF35mm f1.8 macro and the RF100mm f2.8 macro are two of my absolute favorite lenses for this type of photography. I usually carry my Canon R5 and just one of these two lenses when I want to capture some detail shots. Both lenses are workhorses. They are lightweight, sharp and incredibly versatile. But let me break down how I use each one. The RF35mm f1.8 macro is amazing for a variety of detail shots. This lens gives you a wider field of view while still allowing for incredible close focusing. The RF100mm f2.8 macro, on the other hand, is my go-to for isolating details. The compression you get with this lens is just beautiful, and this lens is just razor sharp. For a long period of time I just used the 35mm, but last year I also bought the 100mm to make things easier for me. And yes, currently the 100mm is my go-to lens for detail shots. However, I definitely need to mention that the 35mm is way cheaper and also a great choice if you want to get started. Next up, let's talk about composition. One thing I always remind myself is a good photo tells a story. Even a simple close-up of a leaf can set its focus on a feeling or mood. And here are a few tips that I use constantly. First, get low. Actually, get your camera low to the ground. That perspective can completely transform your photo. At the end of the day, it brings the viewer into the world of the subject. So actually, get out of your comfort zone and don't just use your typical positions to capture your shots. Also, simplify the scene. It's easy to overwhelm the image with too many details. In this case, look for clean backgrounds or use a wider aperture to blur the background and isolate your subject. That's where both the 35mm and the 100mm shine. On top, you can also use elements in nature to create natural frames. A leaf or a tree can easily add depth and draws the attention to your subject. Another option is to use negative space. Sometimes what you leave out is just as powerful as what you include. So yeah, you can also give your subject space to breathe, to let it shine. But another really important topic is of course light, because yeah, light is everything in photography. And here I always try to use soft light. Especially clouds act like a giant softbox and it eliminates the harsh shadows, which is absolutely ideal for photographing small and detailed subjects. But if you're out in the middle of the day and the sun is strong, try to find shade. Look under trees or beside rocks. Or another tip, if you're shooting close-up details, you can use your own shadow. I sometimes position myself so that I'm blocking the direct sunlight from hitting the subject. In this case, you'll get a much more balanced exposure. So always make it as easy as possible for you to take photos. But of course, if you want to capture detail shots, focus is critical. When you're working at close distances, your depth of field becomes rather thin. A small shift forward or backward can throw the entire subject out of focus. And here's how I handle it. You can always use the manual focus. In most cases I use the autofocus, but sometimes I switch to manual focus. It gives me complete control, especially when the autofocus doesn't recognize the key element. Especially if it is super thin, the manual focus makes things so much easier. On top, I really like to use the back LCD screen of my camera for macro shots. You can easily double check your images and zoom in to see if everything is fine. But of course, the aperture is another huge topic. Sure, a nice blurry background is always great, but I always like to stop down to f5.6 or even f8 to get more of the subject in focus. That also helps to reduce the risk of a slightly missed focus. But as always, take a few versions of the same shot and adjust your focus settings. That gives you options later on in the post-production. Next up, let's talk about backgrounds, because they make or break a shot. Because yeah, if your background is messy, it pulls attention away from the subject. In this case, I always highly recommend to try multiple angles. Sometimes all it takes is changing your shooting angle slightly to avoid distracting elements. On top, you can also use a wider aperture if it is possible. A shallow depth of field helps to blur out the background and make the subject pop. That's why shooting at f2.8 or f1.8 can be really powerful. But another really important tip is patience. Nature isn't static. Wind, insects, birds, light, they are all in motion. And that's part of what makes this type of photography so rewarding. But movement can also be your biggest challenge. In this case, a faster shutter speed helps to freeze motion, but that means you also need to increase your ISO, which can introduce noise. However, don't be afraid to use higher ISO settings. Especially in these days, our cameras are great and you can easily denoise your images in the post-production if necessary. But sometimes I just wait. It's all about patience, so just wait until you can take the shot or come back later. So at the end of the day, if you're just getting started, don't stress out about perfection. Just get out there, slow down and start taking photos and you will get some great results. But yeah, these are some of my favorite tips for nature photography. What's your favorite lens for nature photography? Let me know that in the comments. So, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're new, don't forget to smash that subscribe button to stay updated for upcoming videos, and I'll see you in the next video.